My husband vanished overnight. He left divorce papers on our living room table, took our daughter with him, and disappeared before dawn like the 7 years we had built together meant nothing at all. By sunrise, my father was already in my house standing over those papers like he had been expecting them. "Sign them," he said. That was the first moment something inside me started to resist the story everyone else wanted me to believe. My name is Evelyn Mercer. I am 34 years old, and for most of my life, people have described me with words that never felt like they belonged to a real person. Heiress, executive, Mercer daughter. The woman who would inherit one of the biggest real estate empires in the state. The papers loved my father. Charles Mercer had built his company by buying dying properties, tearing them down and turning them into glass and steel. He called it vision. Investors called it genius. Our family called it legacy. I used to call it home. Then I married Noah Hale, and my father started calling it something else. A mistake. Noah was not rich. He did not come from old money, and he never tried to pretend he did. He was steady, thoughtful, and quiet in a way that made most loud people nervous. He remembered things nobody else noticed. The brand of tea my assistant drank when she was stressed. The way my mother used to rub her wrist when she was tired. The exact stuffed rabbit Rosie could not sleep without. He fixed things around the house with his own hands. And he loved our daughter with the kind of devotion that made the whole room softer when he walked into it. My father hated that softness. He thought men were supposed to expand power, not protect peace. He thought marriage was a merger with flowers. He thought love was what foolish people said when they had nothing useful to offer. Noah had offered me a life that felt real, and my father never forgave him for that. The night Noah disappeared, I had been at a late investor meeting downtown. It was raining when I drove home. The kind of cold spring rain that made the windows of the house look dark and blank. Usually Rosie would hear the garage and come racing toward the door in her socks. Usually Noah would be somewhere nearby asking if I had eaten, taking my laptop bag before I could protest. That night the house was silent in a way that did not feel empty. It felt wrong. I called Noah's name once, then again. Nothing. Then I called for Rosie. Still nothing. There was a white envelope on the coffee table. My name was written across the front in a hand I knew too well. My fingers went cold before I even opened it. Inside were divorce papers. Signed, clean, final. For a few seconds I just stood there staring at them. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I ran. I checked our bedroom first. Some of Noah's clothes were gone. His shaving kit was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then I ran to Rosie's room, and that was where the air left my body. Her bed was empty. Her yellow overnight case was gone. So was the rabbit she carried everywhere, the one with one ear bent lower than the other, because she would not stop dragging it around the garden. Noah had taken her. I told myself that meant there had to be an explanation. A terrible one, maybe, but still an explanation. Noah was many things. Cruel was not one of them. I called every friend of his I had a number for. I called 2 former co-workers. I called the gate guard and the house staff. Nobody had seen enough to tell me anything useful. One of the cars was gone. That was all I knew for sure. I did not sleep. By dawn, I looked like someone who had been hollowed out from the inside. Then my father arrived. He walked into my house as if he still owned the floor under my feet. He looked from me to the papers on the table, then let out a slow breath that sounded almost bored. "So he finally did it," he said. I stared at him. "What do you mean, finally?" "Men like him always leave when the weight gets too heavy. You knew that. You just did not want to hear it." "Rosie is gone too," I said. He took Rosie. My father barely reacted. "He will bring her back when he realizes he has nowhere left to run." Then he picked up the papers, turned them once in his hand, and placed them back in front of me. "Sign them, Evelyn." I looked at the documents, then back at him. My whole body was shaking, but it was not grief anymore. It was anger. "He is my husband." "He was your husband," my father said. "Now stop humiliating yourself over a man who never belonged in this family." He said family the way other men say company. I pushed the papers away. "No." His eyes hardened immediately. "Your judgment has already embarrassed me enough. I will not watch you destroy your future over a laborer's son with a martyr complex." "Noah is not running from me," I said. "Something is wrong." My father gave me the same look he used to give people at board meetings right before ruining them. "Or maybe you finally cannot stand the idea that he chose to leave you." Then, because cruelty was never enough for him, unless it came with strategy, he said the name he had been holding in reserve for years. "Graham called this morning. He heard there had been a situation. His father asked after you." I almost laughed because the timing was so grotesque it did not feel real. Graham Whitfield was the son of one of my father's oldest financial partners. He was polished, expensive, and every version of acceptable my father had ever wanted for me. "This is what you are doing right now," I said. "Rosie is missing, and this is what you are doing." "I am trying to save what can still be saved," he said. "Sign the papers. Get through the scandal quickly. The rest can be managed." "If you were me, would you sign or wait one more day?" I waited. That day turned into a week, then a month, then 8. I never signed the papers. At first I searched the way desperate people search. I called everyone. I followed small rumors. I had quiet conversations with people I trusted. I checked old accounts and old addresses. I drove past places Noah used to love for reasons I could not even explain to myself. Every crowd became a possibility. Every familiar shoulder made my chest jump. Every unknown number on my phone made me stop breathing for a second. Nothing. My father took my silence as weakness and tried to fill it with his version of the truth. He said Noah had broken under pressure. He said men who could not build anything for themselves eventually resented women who could. He said Noah had taken Rosie, because he knew it would keep me emotionally trapped. He repeated that story until it began to sound almost rehearsed. Then he did what he did best. He buried me in work. Mercer Group had acquired an old riverfront hotel complex that was scheduled for demolition before a full luxury redevelopment. It was one of my father's favorite kinds of projects. Something once grand, then neglected, then stripped down and remade into proof of his vision. He moved me onto that file with a kind of deliberate pressure. Meetings, cost reviews, permits, structural assessments, investor forecasting. He kept me busy enough that grief had to learn how to sit beside me at conference tables. Every now and then he still brought up Graham, always lightly, always as if he were simply making conversation. I started to understand that my father was not waiting for me to heal. He was waiting for me to break in the correct direction. 8 months after Noah vanished, I drove out to the riverfront site for a progress review. It had once been a beautiful hotel, or at least the bones of one. You could still see the old elegance under the damage. Curved windows, a stone entrance arch, ballroom columns blackened by time and neglect. Now the entire property was halfway through demolition. The eastern wing had already been gutted. Broken concrete lay in jagged heaps. Twisted rebar rose out of the rubble like dead vines. Dust hung in the air so thick it softened the edges of everything. Excavators sat beside steel containers full of debris. Men in faded reflective vests moved in and out of the stripped shell of the building, hauling broken material toward the loading zone. The demolition supervisor was beside me, walking through a schedule I barely heard. We are ahead on the interior tear-out. We should have the front facade down by Friday. Structural haul-off has been slower on the north side because of the old reinforcement pattern. I nodded automatically. Then I saw him. At first it was not his face. It was the shape of him. The way he leaned his left shoulder slightly lower under weight. The way he lifted one hand to his jaw when he was thinking. Across the site, near a debris container half full of shattered masonry, a man was dragging a loaded rubble cart through the dust. His vest was gray with powder. His gloves were dark with grime. He looked thinner, older, harder around the edges. Then he turned. It was Noah. Everything inside me froze. For one unreal second, the whole world narrowed to that one point. The dust, the noise, the broken stone. The man I had buried in my mind 100 times because I did not know what else to do with him. He looked at me and stopped moving. The cart tilted sharply. Chunks of broken concrete slid off and hit the ground with a heavy crack. The supervisor said something, maybe my name, but I was already walking. Then faster. Then almost running. Noah did not move toward me. He just stood there like he knew there was nowhere in the world left to go. I stopped in front of him. Close enough to see the dust caught in his eyelashes and the hollowness under his cheekbones. Close enough to see the old scar near his eyebrow that Rosie used to kiss when she wanted him to smile. 8 months, I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere outside me. 8 months, and this is where I find you. He swallowed once. Evelyn. I grabbed the front of his vest with both hands before I could stop myself. You left divorce papers on my table. You took our daughter. You vanished. Do you have any idea what you did to me? His eyes closed for half a second. Enough to make me angrier. Say something. Not here, he said quietly. My laugh came out sharp and broken. Here is exactly where I found you, Noah. Here is exactly where you are going to tell me why. Workers nearby had slowed without pretending not to watch. Noah glanced once toward them, then back at me. Please, he said. Not in front of them. When the person you mourned is suddenly standing in front of you, do you run to him or make him tell you everything first? Subscribe now if you like revenge stories that hit this quietly. He led me behind a temporary barrier near what had once been the hotel service corridor. The walls there had been stripped to the studs. Pieces of plaster still clung to the edges in pale patches. We were half hidden from the rest of the crew, but the sound of machines outside still thudded through the air like a second heartbeat. I crossed my arms because if I did not hold myself together physically, I thought I might come apart. Talk. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his face I had not been ready for. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. Old fear, the kind that does not leave even after the danger moves away. Your father came to see me the night before I left, he said. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. My father. Noah nodded. He did not come alone. Something in my stomach turned cold. What are you saying? He stood with his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, as if he had lived with this weight for so long his body no longer knew where to put it. He came with 2 men from his security detail. They waited in the kitchen while he talked to me. He said I had become a stain on the Mercer name. He said you would be better off with someone who could strengthen your future instead of burdening it. Graham, I said, and Noah gave one short nod. Then he said I was leaving that night. The dust in the corridor seemed to hold still. Noah, what did he threaten you with? He looked away then toward the opening in the wall where daylight came through in gray strips. When he looked back at me, his voice had gone flatter, like he had to kill every feeling in it before he could force the words out. He said Rosie would not see another birthday if I stayed. I did not move. I did not breathe. For a second, I think I stopped existing in any normal way. There was only that sentence, hanging between us, impossible and real at the same time. No. He said if I tried to fight him, she would disappear before you understood what was happening. He said if I told you, they would know. He made it sound simple, Evelyn. Leave quietly or bury your child. My back hit the exposed wall behind me. Noah kept speaking because now that he had started, I think he knew stopping would be worse. He said the papers would be left where you could find them. He said if it looked clean enough, maybe your father would think the problem was solved. He said if I wanted Rosie alive, I had to take her and vanish before dawn. You took her because of him, I said. I took her because he named her first, Noah said. The words cut deeper than anything else he had said. You let me think you abandoned me. His face broke, then not dramatically, just enough for me to see the cost of the thing he had done. I know. I thought if you hated me, you would survive it better than if you buried her. Tears came into my eyes so fast it almost made me angry. Where is she? Safe, he said immediately. With Hannah, his sister. Your father did not know about her place. He still does not. Rosie has been with her most of this time. I moved between jobs and sites, but Hannah kept her hidden. I put one hand over my mouth. My knees went weak so suddenly, I had to lean harder against the wall. Rosie was alive. Rosie was safe. My little girl was somewhere in the world, drawing and laughing and asking questions, and I had been living 8 months inside a story my father built to break me. Noah reached into the pocket of his vest slowly, like he did not want to startle me, and held out his phone. The screen was cracked. The case was cheap and badly worn. On it was a picture of Rosie in a kitchen I recognized from years ago, sitting at a table with crayons spread around her. Her hair tied crookedly because Hannah had never been good at doing it. She was smiling down at something she had drawn, perfectly unaware of the war wrapped around her little life. I touched the screen with the tips of my fingers. Then I wiped my face and looked back at Noah. Tell me everything I said, every word, every detail. Do not leave anything out because you think it will protect me. So he told me. He told me my father had stood in our kitchen and spoken like a man, ordering materials, not destroying a family. He told me the security chief had sent a warning voicemail 2 days later just to make sure Noah understood the threat was still active. He told me the divorce packet had not come from him directly but through Mercer, legal routed cleanly enough to look formal and distant. He told me he had bounced from demolition crew to demolition crew under temporary contracts, taking the jobs nobody wanted because they paid in cash and asked fewer questions. He told me he kept moving because he was terrified that if my father found him, the next threat would not be a threat at all. Then he showed me what he had saved. A voicemail from the head of Mercer Security, a text chain from an unlisted company phone, telling him he had been warned once already. A photograph of the divorce packet envelope stamped with internal handling marks from one of our legal departments. None of it was enough to save him on its own. In my father's world, men like Noah could be painted as paranoid, unstable, opportunistic. But in my hands, with access to internal records and private routing logs, the pieces could become a line. I looked at him differently after that. Not as the man who left me, not even as the man who had suffered for me. I looked at him as the witness to a crime my father had committed against all 3 of us. I need to see Rosie tonight, I said. You will, he said. Hannah is waiting for me to tell her it is safe to move. It is not safe yet, I said. Not until I finish this. The way I said it made him go still. Evelyn, do not do anything reckless. I almost smiled. But there was nothing warm in it. I am not going to be reckless. I am going to be exact. By the time I left that site, the woman who had arrived there that morning was gone. I did not bring Noah home. I put him in a corporate apartment my father never monitored because it belonged to a subsidiary he barely remembered existed. Then I called 2 people. Mara, my executive assistant, because she had been loyal to me long before she was useful, and Daniel Price, the outside lawyer my father hated because Daniel was the only man in the city who never acted impressed by Charles Mercer. I did not tell them everything at first. I told them enough. I needed camera records from the secondary gate at the house from the night Noah vanished. I needed internal routing on the divorce packet from Mercer Legal. I needed vehicle logs for security detail movement that same night. I needed everything tied to the phone number that sent the warning voicemail. Quietly. Then I called Hannah. When she answered, Rosie was in the background, singing to herself about something small and urgent and childish, and I had to sit down because my whole body went weak with relief all over again. Hannah cried. I cried. Then I told her to stay exactly where she was until I called back. By the next afternoon, Daniel had enough to make my father sweat if he were capable of sweating honestly. The packet had in fact been routed through Mercer Legal before it ever reached my house. The secondary gate logs showed one of my father's security vehicles leaving the property just after midnight and returning less than 2 hours later. The number attached to the voicemail belonged to the executive office of Mercer Security, shielded but traceable. It was not a complete confession. It did not need to be. It was a pattern, a sequence, a line only a fool would keep denying once the room could see it. My father, unfortunately for himself, had always believed he was smarter than rooms full of people. 3 days later, he hosted a private investor presentation for the riverfront redevelopment at the family residence. It was exactly the kind of event he loved. Beautiful models, perfect lighting, good crystal, expensive restraint. He called it a vision dinner, a select group of investors, strategic partners, a few trusted family members, and Graham Whitfield standing at exactly the right angle near the bar, as if my father had already staged the next chapter of my life. That afternoon, my father called me personally. "Be there by 7, he said. "Tonight is important." I said I would be there. "You will stand with me when I speak," he added, "and I expect no surprises." There was a pause long enough for him to register that I was still on the line. "I will speak when the time is right," I said. He took that as obedience. The room was full by 7:30. A scale model of the riverfront redevelopment sat on a lit platform near the center, all clean lines and impossible promises. The irony of it almost made me laugh. My father wanted to celebrate a future built on tearing something old apart. He had no idea his own collapse was standing in the room in heels and pearls. He made his speech the way he always did, measured and confident, talking about discipline, legacy, long-range value. He praised resilience. He praised clarity. He praised the importance of making difficult decisions when sentiment threatened progress. Then he said, "My name." He called me to his side and introduced me as the future of Mercer Group, the daughter who had weathered personal turmoil and returned stronger, wiser, and finally clear-eyed about what mattered. There it was, the final insult. He was about to turn my suffering into proof of his judgment. I took the microphone. For a moment, I let the room think I was about to thank him. Instead, I said, "For 8 months, everyone in this room has been told the same story, that my husband left me, that he could not handle my world, that he took my daughter and ran because he was weak." The room stilled. My father did not move, but I felt the shift in him beside me. That tiny, hardening men like him cannot hide when control begins to slip. I went on. "What nobody here was told is that the divorce packet left on my table was routed through Mercer Legal. What nobody here was told is that a Mercer security vehicle left my father's residence after midnight on the night my husband disappeared. What nobody here was told is that my father sent men to my house, threatened the life of my daughter, and forced the father of that little girl to vanish if he wanted her to live." A few people made sounds then. The small, involuntary kind humans make when something ugly steps into the light. My father finally reached for the microphone. "Evelyn, enough." I stepped away from him before he could touch it. "No," I said. "Not yet." I signaled once toward the technical table. The presentation screen behind us changed. Not to the redevelopment rendering my father had prepared, but to a still image of the gate log, then the internal routing record from Mercer Legal, then a transcript of the voicemail Daniel had cleaned up just enough for everyone to understand. The room did not need every piece. It only needed enough to stop doubting which direction the truth pointed. My father tried the oldest trick he knew. "You are emotional," he said. "You have been under pressure. This man has manipulated you." I looked at him and saw, maybe for the first time in my life, exactly how small power can look when fear gets under it. "If the person destroying your life carried your own family name, would you expose him now or let him keep talking one more minute?" I did not let him keep talking. "You told me he was beneath us," I said. "You told me he left because he could not stand beside me. The truth is that he spent 8 months on demolition crews buried in dust and broken concrete, moving from site to site, so you could not find him all to keep your granddaughter alive." I turned then not just to him but to the room. The man my father called unworthy tore buildings apart for a living while protecting the family my father tried to destroy. Nobody spoke. That silence was the first honest thing that room had ever given me. Graham stepped back. His father did not even try to hide his expression. One of my uncles looked at Charles Mercer the way investors look at a project after they realize the foundation is rotten. My father kept trying. "You are throwing away your future, Evelyn." "No," I said. "I am finally taking it out of your hands." Then I removed the Mercer family ring he had given me years earlier, the one he liked to pretend was a symbol of trust and inheritance. I placed it on the table beside the microphone. "You can keep the empire," I said. "Keep the glass, the land, the speeches, the people who clap for fear, but you do not touch my life again. You do not touch my daughter, and you do not get to call what you did protection." His face changed, then not into remorse. Because men like my father rarely know what to do with remorse. It changed into something thinner and meaner. The look of a man who cannot believe his own child has stopped obeying the architecture of his control. I walked out before he could recover enough to build a new lie. Noah was waiting outside in the car exactly where I told him to be. He had changed into clean clothes, but his hands still looked rough, still marked by 8 months of labor and fear. When I slid into the passenger seat, he looked at me once carefully, like a man who had prepared himself for any answer except hope. "Is it done?" he asked. I looked back at the house where I had grown up, all lit windows and polished stone, and felt nothing I needed to keep. "It is done," I said. "Now take me to Rosie." He exhaled like he had been holding his breath since the night he left. The drive to Hannah's place felt longer than it was. Neither of us talked much. We did not need to. Some truths arrive like noise. Others arrive like quiet after a building comes down. Rosie was asleep on the couch when we got there, one arm thrown over her rabbit, one sock half off. Hannah cried again when she opened the door. This time I let myself cry too. I knelt beside my daughter and touched her hair and watched her breathe until it finally felt real, that she was mine to protect again, not just mine to miss. When she woke up a few minutes later and saw me there, she smiled the way children do when they think the world has always made sense. "Mommy," she said, and climbed into my lap. I held her so tightly she squirmed and laughed, and told me I was crushing her. Noah sat on the floor beside us, one hand on her back, and for the first time in 8 months I understood the shape of my family again. It was not a perfect shape. Too much had been broken for that, but it was ours. And it was alive. Later that night, after Rosie had fallen asleep between us in Hannah's guest room, Noah and I sat in the dark and let the silence settle. "I am sorry," he said eventually. "I know," I said. "I do not mean for leaving. I mean for what it cost you." I looked down at our daughter, then back at him. "It cost you too." He gave a small nod. Then he took my hand, not like a man claiming something, but like a man asking whether he was still allowed to belong there. I held on. My father had spent his whole life believing power decides what deserves to survive. He thought money could define love, erase people, reorder blood, and rewrite pain into obedience. He was wrong. The man my father called a stain on the Mercer name was the only person who ever loved me enough to disappear, work in dust, sleep in hiding, and carry shame that was never his all, so our daughter could have another morning. And if you like smart revenge stories where the truth hits harder than power, subscribe and stay with me for the next one.